there's tons of commerce happening there. And so there is a lot of work that needs to be done around how do we enable conversational commerce? How do we enable folks to, shop the way that they naturally will do, when they go into a physical channel. And these are things that we're starting to also, do a pilot at Omni, right? Where, now you can have a customer, a retailer, speak to an AI bot in natural language, in Pidgin, and place orders, find out what the price is, and basically check out end to end, right? Without needing to, go on to a much more formal, structured storefront, right? Or how do you enable folks to basically chat, right? Let's say they're chatting with a human being, argue back and forth, and then basically place their orders, right? So I think that's one bit around just contextualizing the way that the commerce happens. The second one that I think sometimes isn't as obvious is that for commerce to happen, e-commerce, physical commerce, in most parts of the world, credit is a significant oil or engine to enable commerce, right? So in the more developed markets, credit cards exist, right? So people can get credit to actually make those purchases, right? I think a lot of us have talked about, disposable income and, sort of how there are fluctuations in that. And so the credit infrastructure is something that also, deserves a lot of attention. How do you ensure that the consumers, the retailers, all of the folks within the value chain have access to the right amount of working capital that they need, right? So whether it's the consumer that wants to pay, right, and buy something, before payday, whether it's a retailer that essentially needs to bridge that gap, right? Melvin talked again about cash and delivery, right? When someone places an order online and decides to pay on delivery, someone is bridging that, that gap, right? The value goes out before the money comes in. And so credit infrastructure, I think, is another one that I want to highlight. Again, we're doing a bit at Omni to provide working capital to folks within the commerce value chain, but a lot of the underlying infrastructure, things like credit reporting, things like the collection infrastructure, are still things that, I think a lot of work needs to be done.
Thank you, Mayowa.